From Immersive Labs, this is Cyber Humanity. Welcome everyone, I'm your host Chris Pace, joined once again by Tame Blue Teamer Kev Breen.
Hi.
Lord Product Paul Bentham.
Hello.
And finally, the nurse's hero, Max Vetter. I can't say that
Hello.
without letting everyone know that Max selflessly
Explain.
gave of his time and biceps to do some push-ups in order to get nurses at his local hospital somewhere nice to go and sit and eat their lunch. And so, well done to Max. Round of applause for Max.
Bravo,
Thank you.
Max.
Thank you.
Well done.
Bravo.
Amazing work to all the companies as well who also helped do lots of press-ups while I was doing them.
In these podcasts, we try to focus on the human side of cybersecurity with some tech thrown in, social engineering, hacker motivations, cyber crisis scenarios, and more. They essentially come in two flavours, either us ranting about themes close to the hearts of security types, or us chatting about threat and security stuff from recent weeks. And this episode is one of those. We're going to begin by talking about something that was splashed all over the BBC, and it's the 5G BioShield USB key, which I'm sure we've all rushed out to buy. It's a snip, £238.
Actually, you can get a bargain. You can
Buy three of them.
Is it three? 3 for 1,000?
Three for 1,000. Yeah.
Wow.
3 for 1,000. Gosh, I feel like I've missed out. I need to get right on that. Essentially, though, just so that everyone understands what this is, it's nano layer is a quantum holographic catalyzer technology for the balance and harmonization of the harmful effects of imbalanced electric radiation, mostly being emitted from 5G masks that will give you coronavirus. So,
Science.
of course, people, that was actual science that I just read out there. The other things that it can do are to do with restoring the coherence of atoms, and I didn't actually know that atoms were incoherent, so it's good to know that got covered. And also emitting life force frequencies.
You need them life force frequencies.
Seriously, the best kinds of frequencies are life force frequencies. And so basically there was lots of Twitter chat about this. The BBC had got hold of one of these things that was being sold. I think probably on Amazon, maybe on eBay or something. And so there was a tear down. People love a tear down. So they tore it down. Turned out it was just a USB key.
So it was pen test partners who found this. They went and bought. I think they actually bought a 3-pack, so they made sure they're actually covered.
Why?
Bargain.
So they said that 5G quantum holographic catalyzer technologies are outside of their spectrum, but the USB stick definitely is. Turns out it's a 128 meg USB key with a LED.
They still make those.
LED. They were surprised, they didn't think they made them. This is it's basically an LED on the end that lights up a crystal. Like you've seen the crystals where you etch it in and you shine a light through it. It looks like all holographic. They're £5 from any Chinese market reseller on eBay. That's literally all it is with a sticker on the top.
Amazing.
So it's a Chinese USB stick. Basically, if you spent £200 on a Chinese USB stick, but the bonus with this, that's the bonus with this one, didn't come with any malware on it. So you're already at an advantage.
You assume it didn't come with malware.
Well, that was surely if pen test partners were going to find anything, they were going to find malware.
You know what's really interesting about this, though? Isn't it the Glastonbury councillor who has said that this... I don't know whether he's recommending it. I think Tim's
he recommended
his
it.
name. He recommended it. Isn't it the case that it also claims to create some sort of sphere of electromagnetical interference, free zone? So in that sphere, I assume it's no light, no Wi-Fi, no 5G, 4G, 3G, 2G. Like this thing, it's just a sticker on a really old USB stick that doesn't even come with malware.
So the point was not. So the point wasn't that someone is prepared to sell what is essentially just a USB stick and say that it's doing something mystical that it's almost certainly not doing. I mean, we actually can't prove that. They can't prove that it is, but we also can't prove that it's not. It was the reaction of InfoSec Twitter that I thought was pretty hilarious. Suddenly people were like, well, why are we not? Why are these people not being arrested? People who every day write stuff on Twitter about the latest threat actor group or the latest latest bit of malware, and with the not even a crumb of outrage. But the minute it was a USB stick, they were all up in arms. Where's the
Trading
where are the
standards?
trading standards people? Like, what's going on? Why is no one being arrested? Outrage, outrage, outrage. And I was like, hang on, like, it's not like you go running to the police every time some new bit of malware comes along. Just thought that was kind of interesting.
It's pretty hilarious that, if you sell kind of tinfoil hats, is that the same thing?
Yeah, exactly. You or I could sell tinfoil hats and say that they protect you from, intelligence agencies listening to your thoughts. Like, and if we decide that that's what we say that it does, and you decide to believe us, I kind of think that's down to you. I was a bit. I have to be honest. You could colour me perplexed. I wasn't really sure what.
I'd love to know who made. Is it someone who believes in the conspiracy theory, or is it someone just cashing in the people believe in the conspiracy theory? Because either way, I'm interested in that person.
The other thing that it set me thinking about was, because of all the outrage about how, we need to get trading standards involved, and we need to, someone needs to call the police and they need to investigate this and all that. I did wonder how often are people actually reporting cybercrime? So how often, when someone gets infected with ransomware, for example, are they actually going to the police and saying, excuse me, officer, I've been infected with ransomware. Please, could you go and find out who did it?
There's a website for this, Chris. You should know about this. There's a Crime Stoppers website. You can report some cybercrime.
I want to see the CCTV reenactment for that cybercrime.
Action fraud as well. So
Fraud. That's the
action
one.
fraud.
Thanks, Max. Yeah.
So that is officially where people are directed, if they phone up the police and say, "Oh, by the way, I've had a cybercrime happen to me." They do direct them to action fraud, and you do now. They're actually adding those figures to national crime statistics, which they didn't do for about 10 years. It's like, crime's going down, it's great, and then they added statistics, and they're like, "Oh,
it's just moved." It's moved.
Turns out that who knew cybercrime is fairly ubiquitous. What a shocking revelation it was amongst those stats to discover that.
But it's not if you don't add the stats, you see. It's clever."
Max,
It's not a
obviously
problem if you don't look at it.
Yeah.
Max, I think you have the most experience of all of us, surely, in this sphere. Like, how equipped is a police force, like, or even action fraud? Like, if it's something like a bit of ransomware, like, what is the process for them? Knowing that my Auntie Jean got infected by it, and then being able to actually do something about it, like find someone who was responsible, or whatever. I know it's always follow the money. I know that's always the answer, but how does that work, like, logistically?
It's impossible, really, because logistically in the UK, all police forces are, based around geographic areas. So you have to prove that there's been an offence committed in your area, and generally, if the old granny is phoning up in your area, that she's a victim. So that's one thing. But obviously, when they trace it back to wherever it originated, if they can even get that far, and if it's outside the UK, I think we had a few where we identified a fraudulent ISP doing some kind of fraud, and then we found they're bouncing it from China, so it wasn't actually in the UK. And straight away they're like, "Oh, we'll pass that to our Chinese,
Right.
colleagues." And they're like, "Well, nothing's going to happen there." So it's very, very difficult. I think that's pretty fascinating. I think that the idea that, so we all know that cybercrime is ubiquitous. We all know that people are victims of it every day, and then we have law enforcement, agencies that exist supposedly to protect us against being victims of crime. But then what we say is, oh no, due to the way that our agencies are constructed, we can't actually do a good job of finding out where the perpetrator of this crime is, and so therefore it's highly likely that they will get away with it. I mean, that's the massive gap, right? Is police is a very local, police and crime has always been a local problem. Cybercrime is inherently international at all times. So trying to kind of mash them together has always been difficult. The National Crime Agency is trying to kind of, and same with NCSC here, is trying to kind of bridge that gap, but it's really hard.
It helps that there's lots of case law. There's lots of stuff for real. I want to use the word real crimes, but for like physical crime, like there's lots of case law. There's lots of law. Whereas for cybercrime, there's very little. Like we've got the Computer Misuse Act, and there are a couple of others, the US like Wiretap Act, but there's no real like statute for cybercrime.
It feels like it's one of those things that needs international legislation in the same way as we approach, drug smuggling and stuff like that. It feels like there needs to be some kind of agreed upon international legislation that means that you can at least operate, amongst your allies. I mean, I suppose this is what Interpol and Europol, are doing. Like we've seen work that they've done, like closing down, criminal enterprises and crime gangs and stuff like that. But I guess maybe Max, you've got some insight here. But I guess they're probably not getting any bigger or more heavily funded than they were before cybercrime was a thing.
No, I think Interpol generally is kind of a information exchange. So they don't have hundreds of thousands of officers working across borders. They're usually like one person in each country, and then they kind of funnel information through to the national. So yeah, it's obviously funding on international things isn't growing from that perspective either.
You have forgotten about the international policy of if in doubt, blame China, and if really in doubt, blame North Korea.
Blame Russia. Or more Russia, you've got on the list as well, surely, isn't it?
I know, but Russia's too easy. Like, Russia if in doubt, blame China, and then if you really
in doubt,
we don't know, it must be North Korea.
Yeah.
Is there anybody else that does cyber hacking?
No, they're the only people doing
baddies.
Yeah, that's right. Just so we're clear, the only people doing bad hacking are the ones that don't fit our own political ideologies. Just so
everybody else, that's good hacking.
Yeah, hacking for good. Whereas everyone else, cyber war or cyber terrorists, or I think in the report that I read this week, they called them cyber actors. That's what we're going with now. Russian military cyber actors. Yeah.
Are they actually actors, do you think?
Yes.
We just found a new podcast.
That's all I've got. I did computer science.
So all of this chit chat about the silly little USB. I'm sorry, I feel like I haven't taken this as seriously as some people. There was genuine moral outrage on Twitter, but I feel like I'm not taking it as seriously as they were. But that aside, I think what it did highlight for me is that it is exactly what Max is describing. It's like we can't actually do anything about some of the biggest rip-offs that are happening, online, and we are restricted in the way that we can dealing with making sure that those people get justice, and yet people were up in arms about the USB stick. So there it is, the 5G BioShield. Get yours on eBay today for a snippet, 3 for £1,000.
Mum, please don't buy one if you're listening.
Yeah, don't actually buy one. Note for all the listeners: don't buy one.
Yeah, don't buy one. Or if you want one, spend the $5 on the Chinese Shenzhen Martin.
If you want one, find 2 other friends, at least get a discount.
Yeah, make it worth your while, guys. Moving on. So the US, I was about to say read the US National Security Agency, like I need to tell you that the NSA are the NSA. But they have released an alert to government partners and private companies. Yeah, this just in from the NSA. Probably Snowden knew about it years ago. But about a Russian hacking operation that it says uses a special intrusion technique to target operating systems that are used to manage computer infrastructure. And so to boil this down to its bare essentials, this is a vulnerability in the XIM mail transfer agent, which is used on Unix-based operating systems. So it's kind of like Microsoft Exchange, but lives on Unix machines. And it seems to be that the suggestion is that they are seeing this attack being used in the wild, and they don't give too much information away in the notice as to why they think it's a sandworm or Russian threat actors, but it's I think, fairly unusual for them to release this kind of notification. Kevin, tell
this
me
is so. Hang on, whoa! Before we get into actual technical detail, I need to observe the fact that this is a whole year old.
Yes,
this is like
this
June
isn't
last
something
year.
new.
The vulnerability
the
itself.
NSA have they been sitting on it, Kev? Why have the NSA only just done a flash about this? So Sandworm didn't notice? Oh, we just read the internet from 2019 and we found a new Exim vulnerability. We're going to exploit it? Or have NSA been using it in all that time? Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're not right. We're 2 days away from the 1 year anniversary of this thing being out. Like, it was the 5th of June 2019. The updates for Exim came out, which completely patched this. So yeah, it feels strange that it's a year on that they're suddenly saying this, and a year later it's a weird thing for attackers suddenly to be exploited. Like, how have they just realised? Like, we spotted this a year ago. How have the Russians only just spotted this?
Okay, so I don't think it is that. I think it's what Paul says. I think what's happened is the vulnerability's been out there for a while. Maybe some other threat actors have been using it, or maybe some proof of concept has popped up or something, and then this group has started using it, and because they're watching their activities, they've realised that this group is. So basically, it's a spike in active attacks, and that's why they're talking about it now. That would be my instinct.
It's a dream access, though, Kev.
Yeah, no, don't even get me started on Dream Access. Like, Dream Access is having remote code execution onto a domain controller. Like, don't get me wrong, like, Exim server sits on your perimeter. It's a nice target if you can get hold of it. It's really, like, this is especially trivial to kind of exploit. It's just send an email. You don't even need somebody to open it or read it, but like Dream level of access, that doesn't. No,
Dream level attack. That's pretty cool. Just sending an email.
I mean, that's what I loved about it. I thought that when I read it, I was like, oh, Dream Access is talking about what you actually get, and I thought I thought it was Dream Access because the fact that the nature of the exploit was so easy. Like, you basically just send an email with the right bash in it, and it works, and it does it.
It's not as easy as just sending an email. I have happened to have done the lab on this.
And now, a word from our sponsors.
Oh, yeah, I know. Well, hey, I'm Pioneer. So, in your faces.
That means he's the first one to do the lab, by the way.
But a whole year ago. But it's not. You don't just send an email. Like, you have to do some, you have to craft some scripts. You have to get the overflow going, and then you don't just dear mum, hack the Exim server. It's harder than that.
Well, now to me that would be Dream Access. So what you've just described. I mean, I personally loved your description of getting the overflow going. I'm sure that's that's probably the hardest one.
32 whole receives.
It is trivial to exploit, and arguably, if you've got access onto the email server, then there's potentially a lot of sensitive data. We know, email is ubiquitous. We know everybody uses it, and people will use it to send sensitive documents that maybe they should be using something like SharePoint for. So, yeah, there's definitely potential.
I forget that you love SharePoint. Can you never do that? Don't do that on the podcast.
I don't love SharePoint.
Who loves SharePoint? You're like a SharePoint. You got shares in SharePoint.
Did you just reference a SharePoint server on a podcast being produced in 2020?
I think I did, yeah.
People still using that.
He loves it. Every week I have to put up with him going, oh, Paul, we should use SharePoint.
It has... I'm done. I'm walking away.
Yeah, don't bother, Kevin.
I'm not biting.
It's a waste of everyone's time.
SharePoint Breen.
You know that's your intro for next week.
That's my intro for next week, yeah.
So some questions I did want to ask about why in particular they would want to be highlighting this now. As a Unix, because it's a Unix vulnerability, surely that makes the attack surface much, much smaller, right? It feels like there must be a reason why they would use that particular vulnerability. They must be targeting, I don't know, particular kinds of organizations, or organizations in particular what is it about this particular vulnerability? I don't think they really talk about that in much detail in the notification. In fact, just for context for everyone, all the notification really says is this vulnerability is being exploited. Here is what this vulnerability is, and you should patch. I mean, that essentially is all it really tells us, right?
Love and Hugs 2019.
I mean, so you say Love and Hugs from 2019. I did a quick Shodan search just before we started recording. There are 94,000 and change servers that are still showing as being on the vulnerable version, and I know there is some versions around it. So that specific version has 90,000 vulnerable. So there's going to be more than that. There's 5.5 million XIM servers around the world. So when this thing first came out, that would have been a massive target. Like everybody would have been hitting that. A year later, and still have this 7,500 in the UK unpatched servers, which are still vulnerable.
Ooh, I had an idea.
Oh God!
Okay, it's a great idea. It's a great idea. Right. So earlier you said, Kev, that this isn't Dream Access because it's just on the freaking. It's not on the domain controller. It's just on the mail server. But boring. Who's going to read all those emails? Well, but here's the thing, right? You exploit the use this access to get onto the mail server. Patch the XIM version, 7,500 public service. Thank you very much, Immersive Labs. And boom.
I'm pretty sure that like accessing other people's computers on any level is illegal.
Computer misuse is like straight there.
No, we're patching it.
Hang on, you're obviously not the pioneer. He's not the pioneer on that lab, is he? That says accessing other people's computers is illegal.
Computer Misuse Act, unauthorized access. You're not allowed to be there.
But I patched it. I'm doing a good thing. It's like like when you do an arrest when you're not a police officer.
Citizens arrest, yeah.
That like citizens upgrade. A citizens upgrade.
Citizens upgrade. A citizen's patch.
This isn't the first time we've seen this. There are actually cyber vigilantes who will actually create wormable code that actually does what you were describing. They use it a lot in IoT stuff. So somebody released an IoT, so an Internet of Things infected webcams router worm, using the same code as the attackers were using, except this one went in, patched, blocked all those holes, changed all the passwords, and then sent you a message saying, I fixed you, you're welcome. And off it went on to the next one. For better, for worse, it's a thing that does actually happen on the internet.
And there's an argument to be had that if you are doing it for ethical reasons and you don't do anything illegal, if it gets to court, there have been cases where if you can prove you are an ethical hacker doing it for ethical reasons, people have got off for that. So it is illegal. And if you want to go all the way to court and then prove you might get off.
I'm going to be honest with you. Go to court because I patched an XIM server is not going to go down. Like, that's not going to go down. I'm not going to put that in my diary. I'm not going to put that on my LinkedIn, am I?
Unless...
I think there's a more fundamental question here, actually. So we're talking about us doing it. The NSA have just told us that they know about it and they know that Russian threat actors are using it. Why aren't they doing it? They're, like, the last time I checked, they're the security agency. They could be, I don't know, securing those mail servers, couldn't they? They obviously have chosen
the reason why this is frowned upon, and the reason, from a company perspective, and the reason why patching cycles are so slow is because you don't know what impact that's going to have. Like, you could go in there, patch it, find that some other dependency now has a version mismatch, and you actually take their entire production email service offline, and they have no reason why. Like, everything was working, then all of a sudden, like, everything's broken. Yeah, I mean, it's been a year. Like, it's been a year. You should have patched.
Well, hang on, Kev. Well, you're basically saying the NSA patching your servers could take it down, or the Russians could use it. Like, I'm just going to say...
What would be more ethical is just send an email to all those email servers going...
of course, because they're set up to receive email, so that should be easy. Yeah.
You're the hero we need, Paul.
I mean, you're not the one we want.
The one we need. To the NSA who are listening into this, Paul is absolutely not going to go do that.
Really. Oh, and by the way, when Kev says listening in, he means listening to the podcast that's been published on the internet, not actually just listening in.
Obviously, they'd want to. They're experts like we are.
They're on Twitter now. Have you noticed? They're
Oh,
on
yes. Yeah, I follow them on Twitter. They haven't told me anything useful yet.
But they finally caught
They
up with the
did.
Brits.
There's the Exim thing from a year ago.
Oh, yes, this notification thing.
It's a privacy thing, isn't it? You've just, by following the NSA now know who you are. No incognito mode is going to save you there.
So Google Chrome, the Google Chrome browser, and more specifically the Incognito mode. Story this week that lawyers have filed a class action lawsuit trying to get at least $5 billion out of Google because apparently it has been illegally collecting information while people were browsing privately. I think the term illegal is a stretch here. I'm not entirely. I haven't looked at a lot of the detail. I don't know what it is they're saying that they've been collecting. But we all knew that. Like incognito doesn't stop other people seeing you as a
Wait
user.
a minute. This is going to be a dividing line on this podcast, I think, because Max is a Google hater and Kevin and I are Google lovers.
I'm not a Google hater. I'm just
you are.
He's a Google realist.
Yeah, I'm just realistic about the idea that one company owning all our data, all our money, and everything in the whole world might not be great for the human race. That's all.
Such a communist.
So I've read so it's been filed in court. So class action is $5 billion. It's $5,000 for everybody who's used incognito mode since 1st of July 2016. So go into incognito mode now, so that you're one of those people who gets $5,000.
Actually.
Well, you know what's
how would someone know that I'm using it?
all the people that have watched porn since 2016 are going to get $5,000.
So I've got the documents open here, and I'm just looking at the counts. So that's what they're claiming they've violated. Violation of the Federal Wiretap Act, obviously US. Violation of the California Invasion of Privacy Act, the new SIPA Act. Invasion of privacy. And intrusion upon seclusion are the claims that are being made. And I'm looking through the document, and some of the examples of where this is happening is they've opened incognito mode, they've gone to a website, and the cookies are in there. They've gone to another website, and they've clicked the login with Google button, and do you know what Google did? They tracked them logging into Google when they clicked the login to Google button. I mean, terrifying.
People their login information. Terrifying stuff. But I think we'll all agree that is quite the vision of the future Kev has given us there.
Come on then, Max. Come and tell us why this is bad.
No, it's. I'm not necessarily on the other side, but it's quite. I think they're actually splitting two things here, because there's one thing which is incognito mode doesn't really function like people think it does, and then there's the other side which is Google tracks you, which is two different things, because incognito mode just clears your cookies, does one thing, and it says on the front websites will still track you, but then the other side is Google tracks you across lots of different websites, but those are the companies that track you across hundreds of other websites as well. So I don't know why they're picking. Maybe it's because Google owns everything, so they're picking them for the class action lawsuit. But really, the tracking bit is being done by not just Google.
But are they not suggesting that Google are basically the enabler of that tracking, because it's their browser that is promising in their reading of what incognito mode does. Google is promising privacy, and therefore is
it's exactly that. That's so. Having read this document, that's exactly what the claim is. They're saying that Google are presenting incognito mode as a way of online privacy, whereas actually, like Max said, if you read that front page, what Google is saying is nobody else in your household will know what you've been doing. Not nobody on the internet.
I think that the problem that the lawsuit has, and that's why I think this is going to be a short conversation, the problem that the lawsuit has is that description on the incognito start page is so explicit in terms of telling you can browse, just so that everyone... Perhaps I'll read it so that everyone can have a reminder of what it says. So, you've gone incognito. Now you can browse privately, and other people who use this device won't see your activity. other people who use this device. However, downloads and bookmarks will be saved. Chrome won't see the following information: your browsing history, cookies and site data, information entered in forms. Chrome won't save. So that's basically saying, look, your activity might still be visible to websites you visit, your employer or school, because you're connected to their network, or your internet service provider. He's very, very explicit.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting if you used Firefox on incognito mode and then went to another site and there was another site tracking. Is then another lawsuit against Firefox and whoever's tracking you? That's not good. It seems a bit
Edge
muddled.
also have incognito mode, so are we going to see 3 class actions? I'm opening all my browsers and going incognito now. I want all of those $5 grand pieces.
$5 a
every
piece.
browser,
yeah.
except the Tor browser, ironically designed to do exactly what they're upset about.
I was just going to say, so what if you do want to browse the internet without any of those people knowing, like proper non-class action lawsuit? Just asking for a friend.
Tor browser.
How would I?
Probably
Tor,
your best.
Can I go on the normal internet?
There's a middle
with Tor
ground.
browser?
There's a middle ground. So you've got Tor browser, but you've also got things like Brave. So Brave is a browser that puts privacy like really front and foremost.
Yeah.
But my ISP can still
Your ISP can still absolutely see.
Yeah.
How do I avoid that?
Tor browser.
VPN.
Yeah, but VPNs, like, who are you going to trust on those VPN providers? How do you know that you trust
make
them?
your
Because
own
they're
VPN.
just a man in the middle. Make my own VPN, so that's the only solution.
And there are ones
Brilliant.
like Tunnel Bear does show they've had a full audit
I just
and they
use-
show there's no logging and all that stuff. So there is
Yeah,
some middle
yeah.
ground there.
There are
as
some VPN
You know the
providers
best
that
way?
have full logging.
Use your neighbours.
Use your neighbours.
Use
Yeah,
your
well,
neighbours.
Paul's breaking the
Again,
law a lot today.
breach of the Computer Misuse Act.
Unless the neighbour's given you permission and the password, then you're fine. Although password sharing is not a great thing for people to be doing.
But what if you don't change the default password? Because that technically is password
Still
sharing.
broken the law, Paul.
You
You haven't been invited.
given
Yeah, there's
consent.
no consent.
I think some of this is actually to do with it's people's perception of Google as a company, because it's like Google Maps, well that's Maps, Google Mail, well that's Mail, and now it's like incognito, right? That means I'm incognito. It's people are just, I think they're taking at face value that Google are offering them something with no caveats, no catches, no like, and I think that's just, they've given you the disclaimer on the page. There's even a learn more that takes you off to a website that explains it to you in even more detail. Like the choice that you make at that stage is completely personal. And I just, to me, it's totally obvious that you can't sue them for
I don't
that.
see it going
It's
anywhere
madness.
unless they get some weird privacy advocate judge who goes, I just want to stick it to Google, not because of the validity of the claims.
Also, of course, it wouldn't be one of these podcasts without us talking about Revel / Sodinokibi, which now, because we've talked about them so much, I can say absolutely perfectly. But Brian Krebs, obviously very well-known investigative journalist around cybercrime and stuff like that, has published this week that they are now going to online auctions to sell off data that they have. I'm guessing this is because there are organisations that have refused to pay the ransom. Is that what's going on?
Yeah, so Krebs was reporting that they're now starting to auction this off, and he suggested that based on reporting that less people are paying the ransom. I can't remember where he got that stat from, but because less people seem to be paying the ransom, then maybe this is a way of them recouping costs. I'm not sure how much cost is involved with running a ring of their size, but it seems to be fairly easy, like hack into the unpatched thing, steal some data and charge them for it.
It's the crypto analysis company that did that report on paying the ransomware. The thing about this for me, though, is that wasn't this obvious all along? Like, you've managed to get into a target's computer or system or whatever. You can take a copy of all the data, then you encrypt it all. Why weren't they auctioning this data off in the first place anyway? Like, it was a bit dumb. Just to
Well,
encrypt it
no,
all
I'm
and
not
then,
sure
like,
about that. I'm not sure about that because the argument surely is that the that data, apart from the Trump example, obviously, that data has the greatest value to the person, actually to the person who owns it, or to the organization that owns it, doesn't it? I mean, like if you're encrypting of my data which stops my network from working, for example, it's likely that I'm prepared to pay a lot more for that than some third party.
Yeah, sure, but I could get 10% more.
It could be KFC's recipe
by auctioning the data off.
And it depends. Do they want to have to go through all that data? Because if they want to know that that data, I think we talked about this previously. But if they know that data has loads of good stuff in it, it takes them a long time to work that out. It's much easier to just go, give me money, we got it all, rather than go, oh well, we can release this at certain times.
Before they were using it to try and leverage payment, and the first time they'd have leveraged payment with it and then sold the data on, nobody ever would have paid. Like nobody would ever pay a ransom again. So I think this is just an evolution of that. It's more, they want the ransom payout because they're going to get more money from that. So this is just another way of leveraging it. And the first time they do this, then maybe if you have lost like significant amounts of like IP, something that might, like the cheap Chinese electronic shops in China might pop up and suddenly replicate your new brand new IT, then maybe that's worth paying out for.
It does cite that the report that found since COVID, people are paying the ransom a lot less, based on analysis of the Bitcoin addresses and things. That's what one of the reports say.
The only thing that I care about right now is have that law firm's data with all the Trump stuff gone live.
Oddly enough,
the only thing I care about.
Oddly enough, that's all gone rather quiet.
Yes.
It could be for two reasons. It could be because they never had any data in the first place, or it could be because someone's paid the ransom. So I suppose we won't ever really know.
We should totally, you know what we should totally talk about? Some very clever hacker found a vulnerability in Apple, like, oh, we are so great at privacy. $100,000. I'm in the wrong freaking job. No, but seriously, this one was easy, wasn't it?
Ridiculous.
You registered like as a single sign-on with Apple. Then you registered a second email address that you didn't have to worry. There was no validation of that second email address, and all of a sudden you can like log into anybody's account.
It was honestly ridiculous. Like, it was such a massive mistake. It was such a massive oversight. Like, you can't fathom how that ended up being. Like, how I'm literally speechless. I cannot fathom out how this became a thing.
But the thing that's really, for me, interesting about this is that literally nobody exploited this.
So I'll get to that in a second. So if I kick it back a bit, so the researcher who discovered this was looking at the SSO. So this is single sign-on, and this is Apple's login with Apple. And Facebook have it, and Google have it. Like, you can sign in with Google, register with Google, with Apple, with Facebook, and Apple have their own. The surprising thing about Apple is instead of using like a traditional OAuth mechanism or a single sign-on mechanism like SAML, they kind of rolled their own. And they're using something called JWTs, so JavaScript Web Tokens. And there we used a lot. They're fairly robust, but you need to make sure that you're implementing them properly, and that's what failed here. So like you said, Paul, you can register an account, go to that single sign-on, like click some buttons, intercept that request, and instead of sending off your email address, you could send off any email address for any valid account, and it would return you an authentication token for that user, at which point you've essentially then got full access to their accounts as that person. And like, he did the right thing. This was done through responsible disclosure. Apple said that they went and checked all of those auth requests, and they determined that there was no obvious signs of anybody attempting to tamper with that. So yeah, and then for that he got himself $100K US.
Yeah, he definitely did the right thing then, didn't he?
Well, so what did we learn? What we learned was, if you're a person who's any good at finding vulnerabilities, make sure you find them in gigantic companies, because you get more money than you will if you find them somewhere else.
You know what I think we really learn here is that if you're a gigantic company, that you should definitely have a bug bounty program, because then people are going to find it. It's going to cost you $100K, but nobody's actually exploited it yet. So that's actually genius on Apple's behalf to have that program.
So there's a couple of parts there. So one is like they definitely need to improve some of their coding cycles, so not that in the first place, but the fact that they have enough logging and enough security related data to do that correlation, that's a big thing.
And once more on that intriguing bombshell, it's time for us to end. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please do subscribe, rate, and comment wherever you get your audio content. And if you want to know more about Immersive Labs, you can find us at immersivelabs.com or follow us on Twitter at Immersive Labs UK. Until next time, from all of us, goodbye.